Welcome back to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game. With every conversation, we hope to inspire as many as possible to keep on Dungeon Mastering.
And I'm one of your hosts, DM Neal, aka Jote Maniac. And today we are going to be talking to Kate Korsak, a fantasy author who has written her own novels, but more importantly, made a ton of her own maps. We're going to talk to her about how to start mapping, where to start mapping, and all of those things. But before that, definitely keep an eye out. We have finally figured out some of the best ways that we can manage creating giveaways for both the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Block. You should see that on all our social medias, as well as hear about it here on the podcast. And of course, as you well know, we're trying to ever expand the Block Party Podcast Network, and there are new shows on the network, namely Knocked Prone and Bad Venture Club. So if you want to go check both of those out, they're in the show notes, and we're starting to finish out and round out the blockpartypodcastnetwork.com as we try and add everyone in and make the Block Party bigger and better than ever. And of course, we've got some new logos and things like that. So if you check out our TeePublic store, if you're interested in anything, we should be putting more stuff up there. And of course, patrons, as always, keep an eye out for some of the new stuff coming out to you. But with that out of the way, let's head to the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meats?
The plate meat's back on the menu, boys.
And today we are super excited to chat with our guest, Kate Korsak. She is a fantasy author with a passion for world building and map building. So, welcome to the show, Kate.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So the first question we like to ask people is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? This can be anything and everything, just to kind of give us an idea about who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a writer since I was like a kid. So back in like 4th grade, I started writing books, and they were all like little stories about like fairies and, talking dogs and all the stuff that a 4th grader writes about. But as I got older, I got super into fantasy, obviously Lord of the Rings, Narnia, whatever. And so eventually that turned into a love of I want to write. I want to write fantasy books. And with that came map making. So that was something that kind of was didn't really expect, wasn't something I was I'm going to make maps for, forever. That's going to be my thing. But as I started writing and I started building these worlds, I was I want to make a map for it. So I taught myself how to make fantasy maps. And now here I am, full-time writer and map maker. So
That is awesome, because my daughter is in 5th grade and she just started doing, fan fiction is a really low-hanging fruit for a lot of people to get their start. And it is a heavy suggestion. If you have someone that is interested in a property, just try writing some fan fiction. It kind of gives you some easy guardrails to stay inside. And so she started doing that with her friends back and forth. So it's awesome to hear. It's just exciting because I can be hey, it's doable. It's totally doable. Just keep doing it.
I wrote fan fiction. Yeah. So. You just keep writing, you keep at it, and eventually you get to where it's oh, wow, this is my job now. Who'd have thought?
And is there anything that you're currently working on, and due to NDAs and all of those fun things, that you can tell us about?
So my book that is about to come out is Guardian. And that is, I've been working on that for 3 years now. It started as a NaNoWriMo project. So for everyone who knows what that is, it's the challenge of writing a book in the month of November. And so I succeeded. I wrote 50,000 words and I fell in love with the story. So I kept going with it. And then I put it aside for several months and came back to it and revisited and rewrote and hired an editor and all that kind of stuff. So I'm indie published, which is, I'm so proud to be indie. I absolutely love this community and I love indie publishing. So I hired my own editor. I hired my own cover designer. I print my own books. Well, I have a printer and distributor who prints my books. And so it's a very high risk way of publishing because all of the money for it, all of the funding and whatever comes out of your own pockets. And if the book doesn't sell, it's your fault. There's nothing really,
there's other factors, but
there's
no one to blame.
But at the end of the day, you don't have a publisher. Yeah. You don't have a publisher to take the brunt of those losses. You take all those losses. But it also means that I could do things exactly how I wanted. So I could put my map in my book, and I could put my pronunciation guide, and I could publish it when I wanted, and I could find the cover designer that I wanted and all that kind of stuff. So all of that to say, that one comes out in November, and then I'm working on the second one. It's just a 2-book series. So the second one ideally will be out end of 2025. That's the plan for it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a person who's done various creative things, not to the scale that you have, but has done similar stuff. And Neal has also done some publishing and stuff. I think we both understand the want to be able to control all these aspects, as opposed to kind of giving control to somebody else. I don't know. I just really want to pick the right art for the story or whatever I'm doing. And I feel like I'm in control. Maybe that's not a great thing all the time, but I get where you're coming from.
Right. No, I get that. And like, there is some aspect of like, I just want to do it. Like, I want it to be, you know, I want the control, but there's some aspect too of just like, I want it to be the best that I know it can be. And while a publisher would do a great job, and I would like to try going the traditional route at some point, indie publishing was just so good for this book. And like, I've connected with so many like small creators and stuff because of it, that like, it was great. I'm so like, I love it. I think it's such a cool thing that like we can do this.
Yeah. I love the support that you get too from all the different folks. Like you said, if you meet a ton of other people who are doing indie like you, they can give you tons of advice on how to, you know, handle whatever struggle you are encountering currently. It's great.
And the knowledge you walk away because of how much you've done hands-on. Like, let's say you never self-publish. Obviously you are, but let's say you were to never self-publish.
Yeah.
Again, the knowledge you walk into any conversation with a publisher is like, no, I don't want to do that. Well, just because it's like, no, I've done it before. I've done all of this. I fully understand the process. And no, I don't want to do it that way. And we can negotiate that process further. So the knowledge you have is awesome.
Well, and there are vanity publishers out there that don't care about the authors at all. That was my first book. The Curse of Rago was published with what I would consider to be a vanity publisher, who I paid them, and they kind of screwed me over. They published my ebook with a missing chapter. They did not do what I wanted them to do. Yeah, it was really not good. I had to fight them to get my files because they didn't want to give me, even though I own the rights to the book. It was not a good situation, but that's something that I would have known. I would have seen the red flags going into it if I had indie published like this before. But in the long run, it showed me, I got to see some of the inside, and I saw what they were doing. And I was like, I could do that. They formatted my book in Microsoft Word. I was like, I have Microsoft Word. I can do that. I don't need you.
Nice.
I've never heard the term vanity publisher, but like that is
vanity publishers are essentially publishers that you want to look out for. Or they're publishers that you don't want to publish with. They do not have your best interest in mind.
No, they're shotgun methoding. They're hoping that something in the mass amount that they get pops off with the minimum amount of effort. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And they don't care about their individual authors. Nope. Yeah.
You do it.
It's unfortunate.
You're doing quantity over
quality.
If
I'd have known that, I would have tried to buy the book from you or something. But
no.
The next one.
The book, my first book, The Curse of Rago, I own it. I have all the rights. It is all, that was the one good thing, is that I did not sign any contracts with them. So they are completely hands off. Nice. They don't have anything anymore. It's all mine. So
good.
You don't have to worry about that. Yeah. They're not getting any money from any books sold anymore.
Okay. Surprise question.
I got one.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So for the surprise question today, Kate, I would like to know, if someone were to be writing your story, what would be the perspective and what would be the tense of the novel of your life? I
have always been a fan of third person and past tense.
That's the right answer.
That's my thing. Yeah. That's I have written first person, and I did it more than anything because I felt like I was in like a bit of a rut, and like all of my books felt the same, and I needed to kind of change stuff up. So The Curse of Rago is in first person. But my preference and what I plan to do for all my books going forward, third person, past tense.
Heck no.
That's my favorite.
The right answer.
Second person, current tense. Do not care. Rough. It's a rough go. We're all supposed to answer this question. Second person, you will write a story about my life through the eyes of others. Boom. They were watching me be in the world. It's going to be tough, but it'll work.
I'm a third person past tense person as well. Whenever I read a book that isn't that, I'm always just like, I don't know what it is, but it just takes like an extra half second for my brain to understand what is being said, and I don't know why, but that's how it is. I guess it's, to me, it's like whenever I think of someone telling a story, like around a campfire, or like me telling my kid a bedtime story, it's always third person past tense, and that's how stories are supposed to be told to me.
I get that. Now, I will say that third person present tense does make a little bit of sense at times. I've read some third person present tense, and I can deal with it sometimes. Yeah.
That was my question, Neal.
I like it.
I knew an author would have a good reason why.
And you're just like, if Neal doesn't follow any of the rules, no one's going to buy his book.
Hey, maybe if you get famous enough.
All right, so that sends us down the road. That's my segue into mapping.
Perfect.
To talk about maps, and we have quite a few questions, but who knows where we'll end up. But one of the ones we wanted to ask is because you kind of stumbled into map making, if you will, like the idea of like, wait, no, this is something that I have now realized is really important to me, and literally the stories that I want to tell. And so what would you say to someone that is going to start mapping for the first time, if it's at the table, if it's for their own novel? Because in essence, you're setting it up, I think, for like the story you want to tell.
Yeah. I always recommend trying out Incarnate, which is the program that I use to make maps, just because they have a free version. And like, I used that for literal years until I actually published my first book and needed the rights that came with the pro version to print it in the book. So first and foremost, Incarnate's great. Give it a try. And if you like it, it's like $20 a year. And so I think it's great.
I've been a pro account user because I know one of the guys that made it. So I remember talking to him at a BlizzCon X number of years ago. We're just going to say that to make me feel better about how many years ago it was. And they've never taken rounds of funding. They've never taken anything. That's literally just built year over year, little by little. And now they're doing very well. So a lot of features, and in that, even more features have been added. And again, it's not because there's investors on the back end or anything like that. It's literally just been hard work over years to get it to where it is.
And to us creators that use it too, like they see us, like when I was a small creator and I was just like making these little maps for fun, they were reposting my videos and going, "Oh, this looks so great. Thank you for sharing." And like, to me, that is such a good feeling when you're, when a company like that is like, "Hey, we see you, we notice you, thank you." So that, my first is Incarnate, but also something that really, really helped me, and this can apply for even if you're doing like hand-drawn maps or something like that, is if you look at other maps that you really like and try to mimic them and like just redraw it or remake it. Obviously, you can't use that, you don't own it, but it's going to help build those skills, and you're going to see things like size, for example, like the scale of mountains versus trees or whatever that these other people are using in their maps. And you're going to go, "Oh, okay, I didn't realize that they actually made their trees that much smaller than the mountains." And it's those little changes that all of a sudden you start to notice because you're copying them.
It's wild to think how something so small could be such a defining feature of a person's map making style. I have too many questions right now, so I don't know what to do. I'm locked up.
What usually comes first for you, Kate, when in the creative process? Is it you create a map and then you think, what story could I tell here? Or do you usually think of the story first and then build the map to kind of guide the story? Or are they both, just concurrent because you are constantly changing things for both?
So usually the very first thing that comes to my mind is characters. So whenever I'm working on a book, or even if I'm doing something for D&D, I'm thinking about the characters because I want the world to make sense for them to be in. And so, for example, in my book Guardian, the main character is an alchemist. And so when I was building this world, one of the things I really focused on was, how does alchemy work in this world? Because that applies directly to the main character. So that's usually where that starts. And then I start building the map pretty soon after that, because that's one of my favorite parts. And I'll just build it slowly. So as I'm sort of coming up with the world or coming up with the ideas, I'm coming up with the shape of the world and I'm coming up with the different biomes or whatever. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what goes here? Why is this here? political borders. If there's a large mountain range, it's like, all right, well, there's probably going to be maybe a region on one side and a region on another and that kind of stuff. And so that all is very like collaborative, like the map and the world building together.
It's interesting because I think of like, what would I do? Because it's definitely not what I've done. Because I typically start out and go in like whole continents, but what is on them, go from there. But the idea of starting like with the story, what if my two main characters are riding across this really large open plain? Well, that's a place to start then. Like, okay, well then here they are. What's just to the east, because that's where they're headed. Oh, it's this forest. There's a lot of different ways certainly to approach it, and all of them are good.
Yes.
It's interesting too, because depending on the setting you find yourself in is your ability to change what you've done. Obviously, you are not afforded some of those same changes without having very large story reasons as to why those changes may have happened. Whereas I could just be like, oh no, a forest is a terrible idea. There's a lake. It's not a big deal. I can just, go into Incarnate, erase, lake, good to go. But depending on how much you've already established. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I don't know. There's so many questions. Again, there's so many questions that I have, but are there big sweeping, when do you feel like you've kind of locked in and can't make as large of changes on a map?
Well, when it comes to obviously the book, no, because I was going to say once I'm, writing it and stuff, but no, because especially in that first draft, anything can be changed. That first draft is only seen by me and my writing partner. And the only reason she gets to see it is because she keeps me accountable for actually finishing the first draft. So she says, okay, give me the next chapter now. That's the only reason. Otherwise, I would not let anyone lay eyes on these first drafts. Because anything is subject to change. So that at that point too, and I would say it's once I get there. So say I'm writing that first draft and there's something I want to change, and that's fine. I could do that. But once I start getting into that second draft and I start looking at developmental edits, and I'm kind of, getting to the point, especially if this book has a timeline that it needs to be published by, I can't keep changing things just for fun, unless it's really this is going to benefit the story. It is not going to be the same story unless I change this. There's just no point. It's just, it is what it is. And at some point you got to just hands off and say, I need to trust my instinct on this when I first made this map and go with it.
Has there ever been a time where you are looking at a map you've made that is involved with the story you're working on, and you realize something in the map is going to inform the choices or the story moving forward, where you realize, a small decision of yours is kind of affecting things wholesale like that? Or, are there specific times where you design maps in a way to facilitate those story points that you're planning on doing later?
I think that usually comes into play most with the way I name places, because a lot of times, especially when you have just this massive scale map, I start just putting in the names of places, and they're really more just to have and just so that they're there. And maybe the characters don't ever talk about that place or whatever, but it's for the reader's sake, for them to know hey, there is a place here. It exists. And for my sake too, of just knowing that, hey, this specific region has a lot of little cities in it. And so that helps me when I'm thinking about maybe trade or that sort of thing. But usually that's what that'll come into play, because I'll be writing and go, oh, I guess they need to go to this place or whatever that I wasn't really expecting. And then all of a sudden it's oh, all right, well, they're going to go to this town, and this town name is stupid. Why did I call it that? And now it's oh, great. What do I do? Because the characters are in this area and that's the only place nearby. And so I would say that's where it comes into play, is when those naming places of oh, well, maybe I should have put more thought into that one, but here we are.
Find and replace all.
Everyone
exactly.
Does it. Everyone's really bad at that. I know you've already alluded to it in letting characters and story define maps. How do you have that kind of go back and forth? Because I think it's a really important thing for someone who's at their table. Is I have a map that's literally on the wall. My kid, which is a big benefit to my children, because they're of the age that visual tools are really helpful to say, oh, I'm from this area here and I can see that. I'd like to go to this area here. And so they've certainly defined some pieces of this world because they're in and actively playing in it, which is to say the same thing of you writing a novel inside of a world. So like where, like kind of what's that balance between one defining the other, you know, instead of, I hate using this word, but like just making a map, which is not what I mean, because it's a daunting task and I do it very rarely.
No, I get it. I think, especially when it comes to like characters and stuff. So when I'm creating a character, I am thinking about, you know, what they look like, maybe just like their vibe, what they wear, and, you know, just those aesthetics of that character, you know, before I really go into who they are and that sort of thing. And so when I'm doing that, that's usually when the world is kind of starting to be built and you can see the different regions, you can kind of see. And so that's when I'll start kind of developing cultures. So I've got this character and okay, well, why do they dress like this? Why do they look like this? You know, why do they wear their hair like this? Whatever. And so a lot of those are cultural things. And so then I'll take that character and I'll build a culture around them essentially. And there will be some things that maybe they agree with or they disagree with or whatever, but that helps not only build the character, but then build that region as well and give a history there. I don't know if that answers your question, yeah. But that's kind of where those two meet in my head. And then at a certain point, once again, like once I've kind of started writing the book and once I get kind of past that first draft or whatever, if I want to introduce a new character, I already have basically all of the cultures developed then. So then at that point, any new character, I would then maybe adjust some things or add details or remove details. But it's those like main characters that I really want things to make sense for them to be living in that world.
Are there any valuable resources that you found yourself going back to over and over again or anything like that that you would suggest for folks if they're trying to get into making interesting and engaging and also realistic maps?
I did a lot of just YouTube tutorials when I was first starting and watching other people. And like I said, that's the biggest way I've learned is mimicking other people, watching other people. Incarnate actually lets you duplicate some of their maps that people have allowed to be duplicated. And if you do that, you can actually click on the individual stamps and see the size, see the settings, see the colors, whatever, see what all they use, what all of their settings were for that map. And that has helped me like tremendously, even recently, even as Incarnate just released their new update, the Fantasy Map 2.0, which when I saw that, I almost cried. I was like, this is beautiful. I love this. And so that has absolutely helped me. And then I know Cody, his Instagram and TikTok are Dungeon Master's Diary. He is coming out with a How to Draw Fantasy Maps book. And that I know is going to be fantastic. He's a great dude. His maps are absolutely stunning. And I don't remember the release date for that, but I know it's available for pre-order.
There's a comfort level in knowing that great authors and designers have always done iterations, in the sense that if you read the earliest version of The Hobbit versus the updated version of The Hobbit, they're not the same, because he started with a story and then realized, oh, there's a whole world here. I'm just going to change these things back in this book. Please don't look at it. Don't look at it. But that's also to say that like all of it is iterative. All of it can change. All of it might need to change, because especially when you're having someone sit down at your table, there are things that a person could bring up that you'll just have no place for. And you'll need to create something inside of your world to facilitate that. Like I was lucky enough to have a player who wanted to play from more of a barbarian tribe that was in the frozen north. I have a frozen north. I don't have a problem with this. But if I didn't, do I say no? Or do I say yes? Or do I adapt? So those are always the things to keep in mind, that while some things may be really set, there may need to be others that are changed. Again, I have mine printed out on like a giant tapestry. There are a few things that I can change. Very few.
Well, and there's always the aspect too of like, if say you have a continental map, is that the entire world, or are there other continents in this world that you just haven't explored yet? You know? And so there's always like, okay, well, what if we did explore it more? What if this wasn't all there was? What if there was more?
We're going to have, this is not in the outline. This is nowhere. I've always felt like this is one of the weirdest things. Totally makes sense. Makes perfect sense. I played enough World of Warcraft to watch a whole island of pandas just show up in the middle near all the other islands. We've been flying over this thing for a decade. Or like, I also think of like the Forgotten Realms, where you're like, oh, there's a whole nother continent. I'm just like, with all the magic that you have convinced me that we have not yet discovered an entire equally sized continent in this world. It's a hard stretch for me to wrap my brain around. But I do get it because there's a lot to be said about the undefined places in the world. And I think that's probably like always one of my biggest map making suggestions is that there can be bigger things on the map, but it's once you over explain them, I guess is maybe one way, like over define, like you know the cultures of these people, you've set their history, you know exactly what's going on. Well, that kind of takes away that level of exploration that you can have as that back and forth with your players, or even over defining it even when writing a story or a novel and setting it too hard in stone, only to realize later, oh no, now I'm beholden to that because I did too much in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I say too, like I'll name cities, but I don't really go into details to what's there unless it becomes relevant, because then in that case, I can do what works best for the story that's being told. All I need to know is that it's there.
Yeah, that's a very good skill for a DM and an author, is to not worry about filling in too much detail until you need to, and then you can make it whatever you need it to be.
Yeah.
As far as like your experience with maps while playing tabletop games, have you found that it's equally as fun to kind of make maps for that purpose, or to use them? Do you find that a lot of tabletop maps are lacking things that you wish they had? What's kind of been your experience?
I wouldn't say that anything that I've seen at least is lacking. I think that there's definitely things that are more focused on in like a book or a map that's for a book versus like a map that's for a D&D game or for a tabletop game in general. But like both of them have like their reasons for doing things. And I mean, honestly, from my experience, I've seen most tabletop maps to be a lot more fleshed out than a lot of fantasy book maps, depending on who the author is and that sort of stuff. And I think some of that's just because authors are natural storytellers and not all of them are natural world builders. And that's fine. That's, we all have kind of different talents and things to bring to the table. And so a lot of times fantasy maps are built by world builders and then played by storytellers, when you've got like pre-made games and that sort of thing, which I think is it's a whole other level of like just creativity and creative people coming together to make like one product. I think it's cool.
It is. We've had a guest on here previously who's helped to develop some of the maps for the Critical Role series, like the World of Exandria. And I think that would be a fun project. Matt Mercer might not be an expert at making maps, but if he kind of describes to a person who is really good at making maps, Devin Rue, who kind of helps design them, they both together can make this really, really, really cool thing.
Well, and that's
do you have any? Yeah,
sorry. I was gonna say that's one of my favorite things is I will take commissions for fantasy maps, and most of them come from other authors. And that's so it's so much fun because most of the time they just have, hey, these are the really important points to the story. There's something up in the north. There's something here, whatever. And they'll just sort of let me like fill things in. And obviously I check in, hey, are you okay with this mountain range here? Is this going to cause problems? Whatever. But 9 times out of 10, they're just like, I need the world to be more full, and I know the different areas and I know what's important, but there's so much else that like, I just haven't explored yet. And just do what you want with it. And it's really cool. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had Devin make the world map for the setting that we kind of collaboratively made through the podcast. And yeah, I only was like, really the only thing we've defined is this really big town in the middle and kind of where the topography is. Cool. And then the whole thing's just named. And I'm like, I don't even know what these names mean. This is awesome. I totally get that. This is just a random thought. But like, how much are you, because it sounds like you're making a lot of maps digitally. How much are you making maps physically these days? And like, would you have any, if so, like, do you have any tips for anyone that like wants to make like, haha, and like throw something out onto the table?
So I do make most of mine digitally. I've done hand drawn. Now my thing is mostly like world maps. So I've tried to make battle maps. They never turn out how I want them to look, but I have, and I would like to keep playing around with it. They just never look as cool as I think they could be, but that also might just be me. I like the aesthetics of things. I want my maps to look pretty, but I have done hand drawn before. They're there. I can't say they're the best thing in the world, but I have. And I'm actually right now doing a collaborative project with a couple of other map makers, and they all do hand drawn. And we're going to do like one giant map that we all like draw like a portion of it and put it together. I'm very excited for that. I'm way out of my comfort zone with it. It is way above what I'm used to. It is, like I said, it's hand drawn, but I'm also very excited. I think it's going to be really cool. I think collaborations like that are really cool. So we'll see how that turns out. I'm certain that mine will be the least pretty looking there, but it is okay.
That's okay. Look at old maps. Look at old maps. First off, look at the current world map. Apparently that's like not to scale in any way, shape, or form.
No, the Mercator projection is terrible.
Yeah. And so don't worry about it. Yeah.
Some people make their maps by pouring like rice or like coffee beans onto a piece of paper and tracing it. And I've done that before. And it's just a good way to kind of just let yourself be creative. I've seen a lot of people do it with dice. And if they just have handfuls of dice, whatever, and then like, if a certain number lands somewhere, well then, hey, that's a town. And you kind of just got to work within those boundaries, and it gives you just an outlet to be creative.
Yeah. A blank piece of paper staring you in the face can be kind of, intimidating, especially like you said, if you don't know where to start. So if just doing it randomly, and then that gives you a place to start, and you can still adjust it as you need to, that's perfect. It reminds me of like if you're playing a pre-made adventure or something, and it's got a few different story points, and you just want to mold it into like reading this story can give you an idea, and then you can say, oh, actually I'm going to tweak it this little part, right, to make it more interesting for my group. Or with a map, I like how the dice have randomly laid down, but I actually want to swap this thing and that thing. And it makes it there are a lot fewer decisions when you're doing it that way. You don't get the decision fatigue of, okay, like, what do I start? Okay, what's here? What's there? It kind of narrows things down for you a lot, which I find helps the creative process for sure.
Okay, I had to look it up so that I could attribute things correctly. In 2018, James L. Sutter, who's like big into Pathfinder, one of the funniest things he threw out there was, if I turned in this map, I would basically, it would get thrown back at me. And he's looking at the actual map of New Orleans. So the idea that like things can always be weird or weirder, like you have, because you also think of magic and everything, or just like the astronomical broken nature of economies that are any adventurer walking in anywhere and could in theory just buy everything that everyone owns. Like I could just walk in and own this town.
Hundreds of gold, thousands of gold. Yeah.
I mean, I remember there was a local town near me. I think the population was very small, but you could buy the whole township for $500,000, which sounds like a lot, but is also not that much for some people. And you just be like, I own the town, and now it's Nealville. Like, done. But yeah, so it's also to say, just like, is there somewhere that you really like that you go to? Is it your own town that you live in? Is it the town you grew up in? Is it that you love New York? Is it that you think Tokyo is amazing? Just look at the map that they have going on, and honestly, you're going to get very inspired, if not very confused.
Yeah.
For instance, George R.R. Martin, right, just took Ireland and flipped it upside down and stuck it on England and said, this is now Westeros.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
The map of Middle Earth is not geographically accurate in any way.
Oh, yeah.
And I get slammed because my tectonic plates wouldn't make sense. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you.
Who's got that much time on their hands?
I know.
Geologists, come on.
I mean, we could probably have a whole podcast episode about like what. So that's the line. That's the line where we're just not cool with magic anymore. Because it's like last time I checked, the MCU just was the whole Earth's just an egg for an Eternal, and the thing kind of hatched a little. Didn't blow up the world, which I have problems with. But you know what? I also have to accept that there's people running around with superpowers. So maybe the egg works differently than the Earth that we live on. I know that's wild to think, but maybe that's just how it is in the MCU.
Yep.
Yeah, there's definitely people out there who really care about like your rivers not splitting in two, or like there being rain shadow in this particular part, or it doesn't make sense for this or that. And I wouldn't, especially if you're brand new to this, I would not get caught up in the details. I would just make something cool. Mm-hmm. And like Neal said, magic, who cares? Like, this is just a fantasy world for you and your friends to play in, or maybe a few other people. So it's really not that important in the scheme of things. Mm-hmm. So Kate, in your career of writing and map making and that kind of thing, can you think of any exciting moments that you've had that have been related to your maps? Like maybe even if it's just like the first time you saw it in print or whatever, what's kind of been the most fun you've had with maps and stories?
I'm trying to think of like just cool things. I had someone on TikTok. I don't remember his name now. I'm pretty sure he stopped making these, but he made these 3D printed maps. And he sent me like a 3D printed version of one of my maps as just like hey, I think your stuff is cool. And of course I talked about it forever. And now, like I said, I can't find him anymore. So I'm pretty sure he stepped down from doing that, but that was really cool to see that and to like see my map as a 3D like thing. That was like a cool moment. And then I would say just honestly connecting with other creators, like the map making community is so, first of all, like close knit. Like a lot of us are just like on a Discord together, just hanging out. Like it's so much fun. And then, like I said, doing projects like collaboration stuff. I've done like remakes with people where we each make a map and then we trade and then remake each other's map. Which is a lot of fun and shows you other people's styles. We just remake it in our own style and see, okay, well, here's how they did that. That's cool. I like the way you named that place. So honestly, I just think the map making community is just a cool thing to be part of.
It inspires me I'm not making a map. I can't do it.
I believe in you.
I know. It does. I don't enjoy how much it makes me want to play with Incarnate again. So
do it. I dare you.
Spend hours and hours and hours there.
Oh.
Yeah.
I love it. Incarnate has my whole heart.
Yeah.
I say this every time.
Yeah, like I said.
I love you.
It's so good. And like I said, it's done the right way. And again, I know at least one of the people that made it, and he was awesome. Maybe I'll reach out, see if we can get him on. And
you should.
We'll just go from there. He's very busy with Incarnate. Surprise.
Sure.
Understandably. Tell him I say hi. Yep. Tell him I'm his biggest fan.
I will. Absolutely. So one of the other things we want to do is, what are some homework that we can give people to go and experience? Like, I think of media, and the only thing I can think of is like, they're like, we're going to travel. And it's like the little plane with the dots going across the map. I don't think that's what I mean. But what are some...
Like in Indiana Jones whenever he flies somewhere? Yeah. So I've got some ideas here. My ideas just stem from like fantasy books that I remember reading as a kid that I really liked and that had good maps. So I feel like that's a good place to start, is just looking at maps. I'm sure one of you will also say you should start making them. So I'm going to say you should start looking at them. Some of my favorite are the Westmark trilogy from Lloyd Alexander. He had some really cool maps in the front of his books. The Xanth series by Piers Anthony. Aragon by Christopher Paolini, and that series has some really good maps in it. And then also Lord of the Rings, classic. Like we said, the map is kind of not great, but also maps back in the day weren't great anyway. So it's okay if your map's not great. But yeah, those are some of the maps that I've really enjoyed. You can Google them really easily and find them and kind of get some ideas for your own worlds. The good news is, if it's a series that your players haven't read, you can just steal that map and they won't know any different, and it'll work out great for you. No one's going to know.
They're going to know.
How would they know?
How would they know?
To tag on to that too, I'm reading Brandon Sanderson right now.
Oh,
and
yes.
His world building and his maps are phenomenal. They're beautiful. The maps look gorgeous. The world building's fantastic. So I highly recommend those.
What are you reading right now?
I'm on Oathbringer. So Stormlight Archives. Halfway through Oathbringer. I'm hoping to finish Rhythm of War before the new one comes out at the end of the year.
Nice.
So.
Yeah, his warehouse is like 10 minutes down the road for me, so I'll wave when I drive past.
Exactly. I saw him at Comic-Con last year. He was,
nice.
I'm in Tampa, in Florida. So he was at Tampa Bay Comic-Con, and I just like, it was way too expensive to go try to get a signature. So I kind of just like, there he is. I see him.
He's real.
He's real.
Had a buddy who worked at the warehouse for a little bit, and I've had some other friends who help him run his convention locally, so I should probably try to get in on that.
My goal is to go to his Dragonsteel convention next December.
Yeah. Well, if you do, come say hi when you're here in town.
I will. I would love to. I genuinely think that would be, and like as a book signing too, like that is phenomenal for fantasy authors. Brandon is just such like He's so great, like, to other fantasy authors. He wants to see other fantasy authors succeed. His team is so kind. I've spoken with some of them before, and they're just so encouraging. I'm like, you're going to do great.
Yeah, there's a reason he's got such passionate fans is because he's also, turns out, so far, been a pretty good person. So that's nice. All right, Neal, what homework you got for us?
So I was trying to think of a way to do this, and it's a little untenable to do it physically. But what I've noticed is, like, depending on where you are, the map has a different reason for existing. So one of the important things to think is, like, okay, so what is the purpose of your map? Is it really just to illustrate what the world kind of looks like? But even when you do that, it's from a certain perspective. So the idea is, look up the types of maps. I'm uncomfortable with this second screen I have and the number of different things I've seen, because there's one that says thematic map. I'm not going to click on it. You, dear listener, you go click on it. Like, what's a choropleth map? I don't know, but it's an option. Vegetation map. So there's other ways to think about, like, your mapping, and especially, like, the seeing what other people have done, because it's so important that they've spent possibly their lives learning how to make specific types of maps to produce for our real world. So is one of those mapping types more important to a specific culture in your world, or a specific order, like a clerical order, or, like, they could literally have a regional map for different religions, and they're tracking it to know, like, oh, like, basically we can't go over there, or if we do, we need to bring X thing with us as an offering, or so it could just be a wide array of maps, and thinking about why you're making it, and you can do it by, apparently, like, what's a dynamic map? Does it move? I don't know, but again, I'm not going to click on it right now. So look at other map types. That's my overall suggestion.
And last but not least, Kate, what homework do you have for listeners out there about making maps? Like Neal said, it could be like stuff to read or watch, or it could be stuff to do, whatever you think.
Yeah, I mean, I have said this already, but copying other people's, watching videos, just not thinking too much about, like, why everything needs to work yet, or how just getting the pen and paper kind of thing. And, like, let's just see what I like, what I don't like, what I can play with. And eventually you'll come out with your own style, and with, hey, I really prefer regional maps over world maps, or I prefer city maps, or whatever. And that all just comes with experimenting and trying things, and just actually doing it.
Agreed.
Actually make a map, guys.
Actually do it.
If you don't have one for your world, you should just do it. Like Kate said, Incarnate's free. Just get on there and start clicking around and see what you come up with.
Rice
That's
and
what
dice.
I did. That's how I started. I just started clicking around.
That's a perfect. Someone, please, go take this. Rice and dice. It's your cartography TikTok. You just throw rice, you throw dice, and you make a map. Done.
Is it called Map Talk?
Oh, there's a Map Talk. There's I don't, do we call it Map Talk or Cartographer Talk? Because I've seen that too.
Too long.
No,
it's got to be Map Talk.
Talk?
Come on. We can't. Cartographer Talk. That's too.
Cartographer.
We did it at the same time. Hey-o. It's got to be right then. Yeah. Okay.
I love it.
Cartographers, go. And the other very important question we have is, where can people go to find everything that you're doing online, to go to get your books, that you are the proud owner of all of that material? That sounds like it was a fight that gives me flashbacks of fights I've had in my own life. So good on you for being the sole owner of your own stuff.
Oh, thank you. So my website is katekorsak.com. Real easy to remember. And then I have my Instagram with his author, Kate Korsak. And then my maps are over on my old Instagram, which is writer Kate K. I did that because the algorithm absolutely hated me posting books and maps at the same time. It despised it. So I said, okay, whatever you say. But that is actually working pretty well, because I'm really connecting with a lot of map creators over on the map one, and a lot of other writers over on the author one. And then they cross over all the time. But those are kind of the main places to find me. Same usernames on TikTok. And that's pretty much it. Maybe I'll expand to YouTube eventually. We'll get there.
And your new book?
Yes, Guardian. Guardian comes out November 16th, and it is available for pre-order on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Waterstones, Books A Million, anywhere. I think Walmart has it. Wherever you can buy books, you can pre-order Guardian.
Give us a little taste. What's Guardian going to be about?
So it follows the story of an elven soldier who is, over there, who is trying to protect his kingdom, which is the only kingdom in the realm that still has access to this ancient magic. He finds himself fighting the god of destruction, who's looking to take over this kingdom, and eventually finds out that sort of the history that he thought he knew wasn't as accurate as he believed it to be.
Classic.
For context, what age range are your books geared towards?
I consider it to be new adult, so like kind of college age. It doesn't have anything explicit in it besides just fantasy battles and that sort of thing. But the characters are older, so that's why I consider it to be new adult.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Well, awesome. Thank you for
Great
coming on.
stocking stuffer.
Oh,
yes.
Good call.
There you go.
And of course, we'll stay in contact. Who knows? We may have to have you make a map at some point.
Oh,
but if
perfect.
nothing else, I'm sure we'll have to have you back on.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for having me.
As always, we want to thank Kate for coming on, spending some time with us, telling us about how she's been going through the process of being an independent author, as well as making some of her own maps, and of course, shouting the good word of none other than Incarnate. And of course, if you have a way that you've been starting your maps and you want to tell us about it, the best way, as always, is to send us an email at dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com. And of course, if you see fit, head over to your podcatcher of choice, leave a rating and review, as it will always help us. And of course, if you head over to Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and anything in between, Threads, you should be able to find us at DMS_block or search Dungeon Masters Block and we will come up. And of course, we are always a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network, where you can check out other shows like The Bad Venture Club, Knock Prone, Dungeons and Dragons and Daughters, and hopefully more soon. And thank you for listening to the Dungeon Masters Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game. The only person capable of playing gods, killing characters, and lowering the ego of everyone else at the table. I'm DM Neal. Good night, good luck, and keep on dungeon mastering.
It's not inspiration, it's not wisdom, and it's bad advice.
Make the map. And if it's wrong, sounds like a them problem.
Goodbye.